Hello, welcome everyone to the Tales from the Void channel. Here you will find stories of horror and emotional and psychological suspense. If you like horror stories, subscribe to the channel. Activate notifications so you don't miss any stories. Leave your like, comment on what you thought of the channel and the stories. Thank you very much, and let's go to another video.
Elias stood still in the musty bedroom of his childhood home, the air thick with the scent of old paper and mothballs. Dust floated in golden beams of sunlight sneaking through the blinds, catching on faded posters and yellowed photographs. His father was gone, finally, irreversibly gone, and all that remained were boxes of things too emotionally knotted to throw away. He hadn't cried, not at the funeral, not in the car ride from the airport, not even while placing a single lily on the closed casket. Grief didn't hit him in sobs. It pressed into his ribs like a vice, quiet and constant. He'd promised himself he would go through the old man's belongings, close that chapter with dignity. Instead, he wandered from room to room, a stranger, in a museum curated by someone who'd never apologized. Near the bottom of a drawer in his father's desk, tucked between expired IDs and brittle postcards, Elias found a train ticket. Not a modern one, but a thick yellowed stub with ornate lettering and a punched hole. Departure, April 15th. No year, no destination, just a time, 2:37 a.m., and scribbled in the corner, unmistakably his father's handwriting, "Come home before." It's too late. He blinked. It felt staged, like a scene written to unsettle. Yet a memory stirred. His father taking him to the station late at night once, a plan to leave, though Elias was too young to understand why or where. It had always felt more dream than fact. That night, he couldn't sleep. The clock blinked. 2:10, then 2:20. Against his better judgment, he grabbed a coat, the ticket, and stepped into the cold. Something pulled at him, not nostalgia, not duty, something deeper, like a call that had waited years to be heard. The road to the old station was half swallowed by weeds and time. Streetlights flickered above cracked pavement, casting warped shadows that seemed to stretch toward Elias as he walked. The town had abandoned this line decades ago, rerouting all transit through the new terminal across the river. But tonight, as he neared the decaying platform, he felt an odd hum in the air, like something long dormant beginning to stir. The station sat like a mausoleum, stone-faced, with vines curling. Up its walls and broken glass crunching underfoot. Yet the rusted clock above the arch still ticked, and the hands pointed to 2:35 a.m. Just as he stepped onto the platform, a gust of wind pushed through the empty lot, followed by a distant mechanical rattle. At first, he thought it was a trick of the wind, but then he saw it, headlights cutting through the fog, growing brighter, impossibly real. A train. It rolled in, slow and silent, its engine whispering rather than roaring. No screech of brakes, no clang of steel on steel, just the soft hiss of doors opening, inviting him in. Elias hesitated. Every logical thought in his brain screamed, "Turn around," but his feet moved forward, mind trailing behind like a reluctant child. Inside, the train was pristine. Velvet-lined seats, brass rails, lamps with soft yellow light. It was the kind of carriage he'd only seen in black and white films, too elegant, too deliberate to exist anymore. And it was empty. He took a seat near the window, ticket still clutched in his hand. The doors hissed shut. No conductor, no other passengers, no announcement. Yet the train began to move, gliding forward as if on a mission. Elias stared out at the world beyond, but all he saw was fog, thick and pale, swallowing everything. He glanced down at the ticket again. 2:37 a.m. The exact moment the train had arrived. It wasn't déjà vu, nor was it coincidence. It was something else, something older than either. The kind of moment that changes nothing on the surface, but shifts the entire architecture of what you believe to be real. The train moved without sound, cutting through a fog that never lifted. No landscape outside, no lights, no landmarks, just an endless, shapeless grey. Elias couldn't tell how fast they were going, or if they were moving at all. Time thickened, stretched. He wandered down the aisle, drawn by something he couldn't name. The next car was dimmer than the one he left. The lamps flickered gently, and the smell had changed. No longer old velvet and polish, but the scent of lavender soap and something sweeter. Cinnamon. He stopped cold. A woman sat 2 rows down, her head tilted slightly toward the window. Her hair, a mass of silver curls, was unmistakable. She wore the same pale blue sweater she'd always worn on Sundays. His grandmother. She didn't move, didn't blink. Elias stepped closer, heart pounding. "Grandma," he whispered. Though she had died almost 15 years ago, she didn't react. She looked alive, just distant, frozen in some loop of thought. Her chest rose and fell slowly, rhythmically, like someone napping with their eyes open. The next car held a boy, maybe 10, with messy hair and a permanent smudge of dirt on his cheek. He was bouncing a ball between his hands, over and over, face set in blank focus. Elias recognized him too, a childhood friend who drowned in the river when they were 12. He'd never forgotten that scream. Each car told its own story. The woman he saw crying silently into her hands. The old man reading a newspaper that turned to ash with each turn of the page. None looked up. None acknowledged him. It was like walking through the preserved fragments of a dream. His dream. Except too vivid, too specific. These weren't symbols. They were people he had loved, feared, forgotten, and all of them were stuck. He moved through 5, maybe 6 cars. Time was irrelevant now, before he finally found an empty one. It looked like the others, but something felt wrong. The lights were dimmer, the hum of the train louder. Then the lights blinked once, twice, and when they returned, the seats across from him were no longer empty. He wasn't sure when the man appeared. One moment, the seat across from him was empty. The next, a figure sat there, back straight, gloved hands folded neatly over a silver pocket watch. His uniform was dated, dark blue with brass buttons and a cap that shadowed most of his face. Only the jawline and lips were visible, pale and unmoving. "Ticket, please," the conductor said. His voice was low, soft, not unfriendly, but utterly devoid of curiosity, as if he already knew everything Elias could possibly tell him. Elias handed the ticket over without a word. The conductor inspected it, then slipped it into a breast pocket without looking. "You're late," he murmured. Elias felt a chill spread through his chest. "Late for what?" "For remembering," the man replied. "But it's never too late to see where the tracks end." He stood and walked away without waiting for a response. Elias followed, compelled more than curious, as if his own legs no longer obeyed him. They passed through another car, this one unfamiliar, filled with strangers who looked like composites of people Elias might have known in passing. A teacher, a store clerk, a neighbor from long ago, all silent, all staring forward, some weeping without sound. Finally, the conductor stopped at a door labeled simply, "Station 7. He turned to Elias. "Not many get this far," he said. "Fewer still want to know." "Know what?" Elias asked, barely able to get the words out. "That you left him." Elias froze. "What?" "That night at the station, you were afraid, so you let go of his hand. You turned back, and he went alone." A rush of air hit Elias like a slap. The memory uncoiled itself without permission. His father's grip tight. On his small hand, the desperate whisper, "Come with me, we don't have time." But Elias had pulled away, paralyzed by the dark, by the unfamiliar. He hadn't known. He was a child. The conductor's gaze held him steady. "He waited," he said, "all these years, for you to come back and remember." The door creaked open. Elias stepped through. The door shut behind him with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. The air in this car was still, dense with something unnameable. It felt like walking into a room that had been sealed for decades, time arrested, memory suspended. There was only one seat occupied in the entire car. A boy sat alone, legs dangling off the edge of a velvet bench too large for his small frame. His shoes didn't touch the floor. His arms were wrapped tightly around his knees. He was trembling. Elias didn't need a second look to know who the boy was. It was him, 7 years old, hair too long, a scrape on his chin, eyes wide and wet. With fear, the boy looked up. "Why did you leave?" The child's voice cracked, brittle with sorrow. "I didn't," Elias began, but stopped. He had. That night had haunted him for years in shapeless dreams and flashes of guilt he never allowed to take full form. His father had grabbed his hand and whispered that they had to leave. There had been shouting in the house, a suitcase packed. In haste, a plan made quietly. Elias was scared. The station was dark, the train too loud, and his father's voice had begun to sound more desperate than reassuring. So he pulled away. Ran back to his mother, to the lighted house. His father had left alone. "You knew he needed you," the boy said, almost accusing. "But you were too afraid." "I was a child," Elias whispered. The boy didn't respond. Instead, he reached under the bench and pulled out a notebook, the kind Elias used to scribble stories in before he became a writer. He flipped to a page. Elias leaned closer. It was blank. Then, slowly, words began to appear on the page, written by an invisible hand. He waited on every birthday, every holiday, every quiet evening, for the footsteps that never came. Elias's throat tightened. He knelt before the boy, but couldn't meet his gaze. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The boy closed the notebook, stood, walked past him toward the next door. He didn't look back. The lights in the car dimmed, then flickered out. Elias stood alone in the darkness. The boy was gone, the notebook gone. Even the bench now felt like it had never been there. Only the sound of the train remained, a soft, mechanical heartbeat beneath his feet, steady and indifferent. He turned toward the next door, but it didn't open. Instead, the floor beneath him began to hum louder, vibrate. Lights outside the windows flared for the first time, revealing not fog, but a landscape Elias couldn't comprehend, rolling hills of fractured glass, rivers that ran backwards, clocks half submerged in soil. It was as if the train had breached into some mental hinterland, where memory and metaphor lived side by side. A voice echoed. Not the conductor's, not the boy's, but his father's. This was never about the train, Elias. It was about what you chose to forget. The door before him opened without a sound. A small platform stretched out over nothing, just open space, a void. Wind howled, yet no air moved. The train had stopped. A sign above the door read, "Last Station." Behind him the train flickered, its compartments becoming transparent, then skeletal, like the bones of an animal picked clean. He could stay, drift through car after car, lost. In memory, revisiting ghosts in different lights, safe, familiar, haunted, or he could step out into the unknown. He looked down at the abyss. His breath caught. Then he stepped forward. For a moment there was nothing, just the feeling of falling, but not through air, through thought, through grief. And then, stillness. He opened his eyes. Grass, morning light, the cold iron bench of the abandoned station beneath him. No train, no tracks, just him and the quiet chirping of birds that hadn't been heard in hours, or maybe years. The ticket, now torn in half, rested on his lap. Elias exhaled for the first time in what felt like days. The train was gone, but something heavier had left with it. Elias stood alone in the darkness. The boy was gone, the notebook gone. Even the bench now felt like it had never been there. Only the sound of the train remained, a soft, mechanical heartbeat beneath his feet, steady and indifferent. He turned toward the next door, but it didn't open. Instead, the floor beneath him began to hum louder, vibrate. Lights outside the windows flared for the first time, revealing not fog, but a landscape Elias couldn't comprehend, rolling hills of fractured glass, rivers that ran backwards, clocks half submerged in soil. It was as if the train had breached into some mental hinterland where memory and metaphor lived side by side. A voice echoed, not the conductor's, not the boy's, but his father's. This was never about the train, Elias. It was about what you chose to forget. The door before him opened without a sound. A small platform stretched out over nothing, just open space, a void. Wind howled, yet no air moved. The train had stopped. A sign above the door read, "Last Station." Behind him the train flickered, its compartments becoming transparent, then skeletal, like the bones of an animal picked clean. He could stay, drift through car after car, lost in memory, revisiting ghosts in different lights, safe, familiar, haunted, or he could step out into the unknown. He looked down at the abyss. His breath caught. Then he stepped forward. For a moment there was nothing, just the feeling of falling, but not through air, through thought, through grief. And then, stillness. He opened his eyes. Grass, morning light, the cold iron bench of the abandoned station beneath him. No train, no tracks, just him and the quiet chirping of birds that hadn't been heard in hours, or maybe years. The ticket, now torn in half, rested on his lap. Elias exhaled for the first time in what felt like days. The train was gone, but something heavier had left with it. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, leave your like, and see you in the next video.